today's Locked On Jayhawks, we preview a top 10 matchup in Ames. Can the Jayhawks win at Iowa State?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we are previewing this top 10 matchup in Ames, Iowa between the 9th-ranked Kansas Jayhawks and, for my money, one of the best teams in the country in the Iowa State Cyclones, who are now ranked second in the latest AP poll. We're going to get into the Iowa State scouting report, headlines from the matchup, matchups of the game, and players to watch, and plenty more on if KU can take down the Cyclones. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can get Kansas as an underdog on the road. So you can bet them money line, you can get them with a few points. And you can also get the NFL playoffs better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com and you can get started today. So Kansas takes on Iowa State, 6 o'clock game on a Wednesday night. I don't know, selfishly happy to have an earlier game into the night, so that'll be kind of nice. But the Big 12 title race is obviously at the forefront of the headlines here for this matchup between Kansas and Iowa State. Obviously, whoever loses this game, you're not going to all of a sudden think, oh, man, they can't win a national title now. They can't make it Final Four now. Like, of course, that won't happen based on what happens in this game. But whoever wins is going to better set themselves up to, be at the top of the Big 12 table at the end of the year. They're going to better set themselves up to be a better seed in the NCAA tournament. And to a certain standpoint, like, you can argue both teams that there's more at stake to win. For Kansas, you already have that early loss to West Virginia at home. So, like, there's a bigger stake to win because you need to kind of gain one back that maybe you weren't supposed to win in a way like that. And also to kind of prove that these last 3 games with Shakeel Moore in the starting lineup are, it doesn't just translate against, some of the middle lean tier teams in the Big 12, but it translates to the top of the teams in the Big 12 and in the country. For Iowa State, you could argue it's more important for them to win because they still have to go into Lawrence. So, like, if you're Kansas, you could view it as, oh, well, if you lose this one, you can try to get them back in Lawrence and at least even things up, right? Whereas with Iowa State, if you lose this game knowing you still have to go to Lawrence, it makes it a little bit more difficult to win the conference. So the Big 12 title race, obviously important. Obviously, if you win the Big 12, you're going to set yourself up probably to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament at the end. Also for Kansas, this is trying to win in Ames for the first time since February 1st of 2022. Now, Kansas, I believe, has a winning record in Hilton Coliseum all time, but they've lost the last couple. If you win this game for Kansas, and this goes to the full idea of playing on the road, because we talked a lot about Kansas's road struggles, especially after they lost back-to-back road games with Creighton and Missouri, but they were able to win their last 2 road games, most recently on Saturday at Cincinnati. If Kansas is able to win a 3rd straight road game, and it be this one against one of the best teams in the country, in one of the toughest places in the country to play, I think we would have to put to bed the road struggles for KU. But if you lose this game, I don't think that it necessarily gets re-brought up like, oh, they lost this game because the road struggles, but it doesn't go away the in the back of your mind like, oh, this has been a thing for them. Now, as far as the Iowa State scouting report, Cyclones are 14-1 on the season. Their only loss has come to Auburn, who, I would argue is probably the best team in college basketball this year. Now, I know Johnny Broom or whatever, he just suffered like an injury recently, so I don't know what that'll end up impacting for their season and everything. But when they're fully healthy, I think Auburn is probably the best team in the country in my mind. I think Ken Palm has it that way. And that was a game where Iowa State, it was in the Maui Invitational, so neutral site. Iowa State was up by as much as 18 points. I think it was 41-23 in the first half. And they ended up losing the game by 2 points. So you lose a game on a neutral site in which you were probably the better team for a majority of the game, you could say. And you ended up losing the game barely. They're so close to being undefeated. Like, you can make a real case that Iowa State could very easily be the best team in the country right now. Like, I mean, if one shot goes your way, one thing swings your way in that game, or you don't give up as big of a lead, like, you are undefeated right now, and you would have a win against Auburn, and we wouldn't even be discussing who the best team in the country is. Like, that would be their moniker at this point of the season. That doesn't guarantee you're going to finish there. But most importantly, or I think impressively, I would say, they have an 11-point win over a Marquette team that could end up winning the Big East. They have a 9-point win at a possible tournament team in Iowa, which on the road in a rivalry. They have a neutral site win over Dayton. They have 2 wins against Colorado, both by double digits. They have other Big 12 victories against Baylor, which came by 19 points, Utah by 23, and then most recently, they beat Texas Tech in overtime, a game that Texas Tech very easily could have won, but couldn't take advantage of some late situations in that one. But overall, Iowa State's ranked 4th on KenPom. They have top 10 units on offense and defense. This is a very balanced team. This is, I think, far from, when I think of like TJ Otzelberger, the team that he had a couple years ago that made it to the Sweet 16, I think that was his first team when they got like an 11 seed. And that team was, okay, we have a couple guys who can make shots, but for the most part, like, and really, I don't know, even like, this is year 3 or 4 for Otzelberger. Like, this has been the case in some of the years past where they've been more of a defensive team than an offensive team. And sometimes offensively, it's been a bit of a grind, but they were so elite on the defensive end of the court. And I think what's interesting with this year's team, it doesn't follow that same path at all. Like, sure, they still could muck it up defensively if they want to, because the defense is still really good. But this is a team that right now is playing at a top 25 pace on the offensive side of the ball. So, like, they're playing fast on the offensive side of the ball. Think about this, because again, like you might have these preconceived notions about what the TJ Otzelberger Iowa State team is, in terms of, being that defense, more muck it up team. And I can think of some games where they've come in Allen Fieldhouse with Otzelberger and it's been 63-61, 62-60, something like that. Iowa State this season has scored 80 or more points in 13 of their 15 games, and they've scored 99 or more points in 3 games. So it's not that same style of play, even though they do still have a very good defense. And a big reason why is they have a 3-headed monster at their guard spots. You could argue this is the best backcourt in the country. I think North Carolina, who you played earlier, would have a conversation there, but they've underperformed this season, so I would go with Iowa State over them. Off the top of my head, I don't know who else is coming to mind. Certainly there's other teams who have good guards, but I think Iowa State is up there with any of them. 6'1" point guard Tamin Lipsey. He is somebody who I thought coming into the year could end up being a Big 12 player of the year type player. He had a really good year last year after being kind of a Dajuan Harris type in year 1. He's been more of a Dajuan Harris type this year. Good defender, 10.4 points per game, 3.3 assists, 48% from the field, 31% from 3. But Keshon Gilbert, the 6'4" guard, has kind of taken over some point guard duties. They've kind of been splitting them. He also plays at the 2. I mean, the 6'4" guard is getting 16.1 points, 4.7 assists, 1.5 steals per game. And that's on 52% from the floor, 32 from 3, 73 at the foul line. And then Curtis Jones has been one of the best scorers in the country. He is a 6'4" guard who's getting 17.3 points per game, and he's doing it on high efficiency. 46% from the floor, 39 from 3, 84 at the foul line. You'll also see a 6'5" guard in Nate Heisey. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it. More of a glue guy type, 20 minutes per game, 6'5". You can play him at the 2, 3, 4, whatever you need, just kind of fills in, and ball mover, fine defender, all that sort of stuff. They have a 6'8" wing in Milan Momcilovic, former 5-star recruit, had a good freshman year last year. He's a knockdown shooting 4-man. Sometimes they'll play him at the 3, but over 10 points per game, 44% from 3. You have those 3 guards. Having another guy who can be out there and just be lengthy and shoot threes, like that's a good thing to have. Then they've got 6'9", 240-pound forward Joshua Jefferson. This team, I think, excellent job of, okay, I say all the time, I don't think you should recruit the transfer portal just for the best possible players. You should recruit the transfer portal for the best players that fit your specific role. And I think Iowa State is a perfect example of that. They brought in Joshua Jefferson. They also brought in another guy at the center position we'll talk about here in a second. But Jefferson came over from St. Mary's. He's been a home run edition, perfect fit. 12 points per game, 8 rebounds per game, almost 3 assists per game, almost 2 steals per game. He just does everything. He's been awesome. He's shooting 53% from the floor, 82% at the free throw line. Then at the center position, might see a handful of minutes here or there from Jefferson at the center position, but it's mostly 6'10", 260-pound Brandon Chatfield. That's kind of your classic big body Iowa State center who rebounds, plays defense, doesn't shoot a ton, but when he does, they're usually dunks or high percentage shots. And then Deshaun Jackson, that's the other guy who it felt like they did a really good job of going for fit in the transfer portal. 6'11", 274 pounds, Mammoth of a human, 9.5 points per game, 5.1 rebounds, 1.2 blocks per game. That's around 18 minutes a night on 64%. So that means between the two of them, they're getting close to 14 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks per game on good efficiency at the center position. So what they do well overall for Iowa State? Well, offensively, they don't turn the ball over. They score twos super efficiently. They are ranking in the top 15 nationally at both. They get offensive rebounds, so they get extra possessions. They get to the free throw line, both at top 60 rates nationally too. Then on the defensive end of the ball, they have been elite at forcing turnovers. They have done a really good job of avoiding sending teams to the free throw line. They're top 25 nationally in turnover rate, steal rate, and free throw rate defense, so kind of encompassing those two things we just mentioned. And then they have a top 50 2-point defense rate nationally too. So they're limiting teams inside. Now, what they've struggled with, this is going to be nitpicking a little bit because they're like, even the things where they're not as good as the strengths, they're still like above average nationally. And one of those would be 3-point shooting. So they're shooting 34.7% from three. That's like better than Kansas is by 1.5% basically. And that's still 113th nationally. So that's still like above average to solid nationally. But they shoot them super low volume. And because they're like elite at everything else, I had to kind of include this here. But, you know, they're going to be playing at home, juiced up crowd. They're probably going to shoot well from three in this game. They also don't get a ton of blocks, but they are above average nationally at that too. And then so far in Big 12 only games, if we just look at their Big 12 only games where they're undefeated so far, their biggest weaknesses have been defensive rebounding. They're just 12th in the league. So maybe this will be a game where the improved rebounding KJ Adams and Floyd Badunga, KU can grab some extra offensive rebounds. They've been getting better at it as the season's gone on, and this would be a game where you really need it to come through. Let's talk about those matchups of the game, though. Players to watch. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode of the show today is brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering, refreshing my space helps me get back into the routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair is everything you need, all within your budget. I'm talking you can get a new chair that you've been looking at, and you deserve it. Let's be honest here. You can get a new dog bed for your dog or for your pet that you love so much. Check out Wayfair at wayfair.com. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. That's wayfair.com, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, continuing on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, previewing Kansas, Iowa State, and don't forget to check out some of our KU football content, some of our Shaq Moore content from this week as well. We also talked about Justice Finkley on a bonus episode, who is a transfer that KU added from Texas. So check that out if you haven't already. Don't forget to make Locked On College Basketball or Locked On College Football your second listen every day. All right, matchups of the game. Kansas, Iowa State. Matchup number one. Can the three-guard lineups of Dajuan Harris, Zeke Mayo, Shaq Moore, and if you want to throw out, you know, when KU has Diggy Coit in there and Rever Mismatch, but I think it's mainly those three for a reason, a defensive reason. Can those three bother the three Iowa State guards more than normal? Because Iowa State's three guards this season have been excellent. They're averaging around 44 points per game from that three-headed guard monster. That's almost as much as Kansas scored against Cincinnati as a team last game. Iowa State's been a scoring juggernaut this year. And when you look at the reason why, it is mainly because of those guards opening things up for the rest of the team and making tough shots. And I do wonder how much of a matchup problem they present for a lot of other teams who, you know, aren't playing three guards necessarily. I do wonder if this is actually an okay match, like okay to a certain standpoint. They're still going to put up numbers. They're still going to put, you know, hit shots and all that sort of stuff. But if you're Kansas, it's not about just shutting them out or shutting them down. It's about slowing them down. It's about making them more inefficient than normal. It's about making them take more shots to get to their point totals than normally would be in a given night. And I can't help but wonder if KU playing Shakeel Moore and playing basically a three-guard lineup with Dajuan Harris, where Dajuan is your former Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, Shakeel Moore, we'll see if he ends up on the All Big 12 defensive team. Probably not, because he had the injury earlier in the season that kept him out of games. And even though he's playing bigger minutes now, you know, his 20 minutes a game with missing as many games as he did, going to be enough to get on that list. I don't know, but like for my money, if he were playing 30 minutes a game or he didn't have those missed games, like I think he would end up on it. Like, is he one of the best defenders in the Big 12? Yes, I think he certainly deserves to be in that conversation. I guess it gets more difficult now because there's so many teams and so many more players. But still, I think he is in that conversation, I guess, is the very least way of putting it. So does that help Kansas here that they are playing more of this three-guard lineup that stylistically can match up with what Iowa State wants to do a little bit better than maybe some other teams, both in terms of the personnel matches up and in terms of the archetypes of those players for KU are built on defense. So I think that'll be really interesting to see how that matches up. And I mean, ideally for KU, it becomes something where, this becomes an okay matchup for you. The downside would be if Iowa State wins those matchups, you'll just point back and be like, okay, both teams are playing the same style, but Iowa State just had the better scores there, right? Number 2 is making shots inside. Only 3 teams have even shot 50% or better from 2-point range against Iowa State. So it hasn't happened very often. Now, when all 3 of those teams did shoot 50% or better against Iowa State, they seemed to crack some sort of code because not only did they shoot 50% or better, they shot 59% or better. So it's like a big jump between teams who got there and teams who didn't get there, right? And those 3 teams, it was Auburn, which was the lone loss so far this season for Iowa State. It was a game at Colorado, who, yes, they won the game by 10 points, but also Colorado has not been very good this year. They're ranked outside of the top 80 on KenPom, and that was a 1-point game at the 10-minute mark. So Colorado hung in there, right? And then you had Dayton, which Dayton's been a fine team. They might be an NCAA tournament team. They're right around the 50 ranking on KenPom, but that was a 5-point game. So I think you could point to this and say, if you can find a way to get easy buckets and convert them, you're going to at least hang in there, right? You're going to give yourself a chance late in the game. So far, Kansas has shot 68% at the rim. That's not all 2-point shots, but they've been very good there. That's been, their bread and butter on 2-point shooting. That's 84th percentile nationally on one of the highest volumes in the country. They also shot 42.6% from the mid-range, which is actually interesting because that's 90th percentile nationally. Do you feel like Kansas is one of the top 10% of college basketball in mid-range shooting? Well, they are. So in total, Kansas is at 55% on 2-point shots. That ranks 75th in college hoops. So they've been good all the way across, but not elite, not dominant. I think part of that is certain teams have condensed the paint and how they've defended KJ Adams. It'll be interesting to see how Iowa State does that and defends KJ Adams and how KU counters that. But so far this season, Iowa State opponents are shooting 67% at the rim. So, teams are shooting well at the rim when they get there. The problem is because of Iowa State's defense and their ball pressure that they provide in the way they play defense under TJ Otzelberger, it's really tough to get the shots at the rim. But once you can find that angle, once you can get there, they usually go in at a pretty high rate. So can you get there enough in this game if you're KU? Matchup number 3 here has got to make some threes. Kansas won by 14 their last game at Cincinnati. That was a game that Kansas was 2 of 21 from 3-point range. I feel very confident saying that's not going to happen this time. If Kansas goes 2 of 21 from 3, they are not going to win in Ames. In fact, they'll probably lose by double digits. You have to be able to make some threes at a reasonable rate in this game. And on the season, that dropped Kansas to 33.1% from 3. That's 197th in the country. Right now in Big 12 only play, Kansas is 26.5% from 3. That is obviously very bad. I don't think this is like an elite 3-point shooting team, but I do think it's solid. I do think it's like average, above average. I think it's better than it was last year. So I guess that would tell me that there is some positive reversion to the mean coming, right? If you believe they're better than this, which I do, that would mean positive reversion to the mean at some point. Doesn't mean it's going to be this game. Doesn't mean it's going to be next game, but that would indicate that would be the case. And prior to these 4 conference games, which have been bad 3-point shooting in the 4 conference games, Kansas did have 4 straight games of 8 or more made threes, including one with 10 made threes. So it's not that far off from happening. You need to restart that streak. I think in this game, if you want to beat Iowa State, help open up the paint a tad inside a little bit more if you're able to hit some of those and try to sneak one out against an awesome team on the road. All right, let's get to our players to watch. This is Locked On Jayhawks. And our episode of the show is brought to you by Rocket Money, which can help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. I think one of the best features is that subscription tracker, but I also like that you can go in and you can set your goals. You can also sort out different things that you're, paying every month into bills, utilities, whatever, and you can really get a great breakdown with an awesome visual on the app of where all your money is going each month, and it'll help you budget. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, continuing on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, finishing up here with some players to watch. We will be back on Thursday to recap whatever happens. I guess technically we'll be back Wednesday night. We'll get you a recap if you want to go straight after the game live of the KU Iowa State game. There could be some recruiting news for KU later today, so we might have a bonus episode if that goes KU's way as well. Okay, players to watch for the Jayhawks. The matchup, we're going to go with Curtis Jones versus Zeke Mayo, and I'm not entirely certain who is going to get who on the defensive end of the court for really both teams, right? I mean, if they're coming out with a lineup of Lipsey, Gilbert, and Jones, and you're coming out with the lineup of Moore, Harris, and Mayo, there's a lot of different ways you could go about who defends who, right? Do you just have Harris on Lipsey, that kind of natural point guard on point guard? Do you feel like that's a waste because Lipsey is the lowest scoring of the three and the worst three-point shooting of the three, where you'd want to put Harris on Jones or put Harris on Gilbert, right? In my mind, I'm kind of wondering if we end up seeing, I don't know, maybe even Gilbert guards Mayo, or maybe even I think Lipsey could guard Mayo, because if he's their best defensive guard, then maybe that makes sense there. And then if you're KU, maybe you put, Dajuan Harris on Jones or Gilbert, and then you put Shakeel Moore on the other one, and then Zeke Mayo would be guarding Tamin Lipsey at that point. I don't know how it's going to all cross match, but I think just in general, if these two are on each other or they're not, I think the importance of this game for both of them, you look at a game where if you think this is going to be a close game down to the stretch, which I feel like it will, and it's a road game, obviously, for KU, you have to have somebody who can make those clutch buckets for you. And sometimes we think of clutch as just the last shot of the game. It's more than that, right? It's the shot clock's winding down with 3.5 minutes to go, and it's a tie game, and you really need a bucket before the under 4 timeout, right? There's different areas of it too. And so you look at the best shot makers on the perimeter for both teams. It is Curtis Jones and it is Zeke Mayo. So I think just inherently that becomes the matchup. And also I think for KU, it was huge to see him kind of do some of those things in the win against Cincinnati on the road. But what I find interesting so far this season, I mentioned this last game too, right now, Zeke Mayo is only shooting 36% on the road this season. He is only shooting 24% on the road this season from three. He is averaging 17.1 points per game at home. He is averaging 8.6 points per game on the road. You need Allen Fieldhouse, Zeke Mayo, if you want to match Curtis Jones' scoring ability and you want to win this game. And I don't know if there's something to that, the comfortability of home, or, the Lawrence kid. There's something cool about him doing so well when he is in Allen Fieldhouse, but you need some of the Allen Fieldhouse, Zeke Mayo in this game if you want to win on the road in Ames. High on the go-off meter, I'm going to go with Hunter Dickinson here. So you look at it, the main area that Iowa State gives up three-point looks is actually above the break. For what it's worth, Zeke Mayo takes 4.7 of those per game, so probably going to be a lot of three opportunities for Zeke Mayo there. David Coit is second most on the team at 2.9. Dajuan Harris is third at 2.6. Harris is only shooting 28% on those. Coit's only 32%. Zeke is 35%. I should mention Ryland Griffin is 36% there in a little lower volume because the minutes haven't been there. But you know who else takes above the break threes at a pretty good rate? 71st percentile nationally for his position. That would be Hunter Dickinson, who hasn't shot them well, mind you. Only 27% from three above the break this season. But in years past, whether it was last year at Kansas, whether it was the year before at Michigan, he has shot those shots well. And going back to the idea, do you think there's a reversion to the positive for KU? Well, I think Kansas needs him to make one or two threes in this game. And part of me is like, well, he's not shooting them well right now. So in a big game like this, are you better off just being like, just don't shoot any? Maybe, but also if you're a 4, 5, 6 point underdog, Don't you need a few things to go your way that maybe haven't been going your way every game? And that would be one of those that could be a swing shot, a swing skill in this game. Beyond that, Iowa State has strong big men down low. But I think that's okay for Hunter defensively. Like, I don't view either of their big men as being guys who are going to, I guess we saw the situation last year where I forget the name of their wing who didn't normally shoot a lot of threes, but he hit like 4 threes in the game against Kansas. We'll see if Josh Jefferson or something like that can pull something like that. But I think you're comfortable if you're Kansas being like, hey, we're just going to give you 2 open threes in the game and hope you go 0 for 2. And if you go 1 for 2, it is what it is. We're just going to hope you don't go 2 for 2, right? That could happen. I don't think it's a horrible game for Hunter defensively. And I think he could, by being in there, rack up a bunch of rebounds. I think he could rack up some points. Let's not forget last year, against this defense, Hunter Dickinson, he had 20 points and 15 rebounds in the matchup in Ames. So I think he's going to have another big one for KU this go around. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back with you to recap the game later tonight into your Thursday. See you then with LOJ.